emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 539.PR0324, certificate number 44141. Good night, Moon.
Good night, Moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Good night, light and the red balloon. Good night, bears. Good night, chairs.
Good night, Moon. Good night.
Good night,
Moon.
kitten.
Good night, Moon.
Good night,
Moon.
mittens.
Good night, bears. Good night, chairs. You're a pretty good dad. I assume you read
Thanks.
or read bedtime stories
Yes.
to your kid.
Yes.
Is that a part of your winding down routine to this day?
Yes, she really likes to be read to, and she, you know, increasingly she wants to be, she wants to hear more and more sophisticated stories, but she likes, weirdly, she likes to have comic books read to her.
And then Garfield walks over to the window.
Yeah, I read the other night. I read a bunch of Calvin and Hobbes to her, and whenever I go over Calvin and Hobbes with her, I realize that it's just like a Pixar movie. There are so many references that only mom and dad will get. It's not a children's cartoon at all. It's a comic strip for smarty pantses, and so she loves it because it's a comic strip. But
you know, we loved Peanuts, and you go back and read it now, and it's full of Peanuts has surprisingly topical references to,
and it's so dark.
Yeah,
It's really a bummer, a heavy 50s head trip.
But the topical references kept up. Like in the 90s, in the late strips, Snoopy dresses as Joe Grunge. Are you aware of this?
I think I remember.
Instead of Joe Cool.
He's wearing glasses.
The kids somehow are the same age, but 50 years have passed, and they're not interested in what Bill Malden and Ted Williams anymore.
Yeah, I'm right. I'm always, I'm reading her these comics, and I have to stop like every panel and go, so the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, I'm trying to.
You said you wanted more sophisticated stuff.
I'm trying to back it up with other stuff, but yeah,
you guys are alternating the Charterhouse of Parma with Garfield at large.
What's funny is that I'll read a chapter of Harry Potter to her or whatever, and then she'll go.
Do you do the voices?
Yes, and that's what she likes about it, and that's why I had to stop reading Tintin to her, because I have 14 different Tintin voices, and it's exhausting. 40 minutes of reading Tintin aloud, because nothing ever happens in Tintin.
And it's 100% dialogue, so you don't even get a break to talk in your voice.
It's like, what did you say? I said a thing. You said a thing. What was the thing? I'll say it again.
Do any of the Tintin characters talk in your voice, or are they all just original creations?
My voice for Tintin is just my normal voice, a little bit pitched up. So I'm like, hey, this is my Tintin voice, but it's not, there's no accent. And unfortunately, I made Professor Calculus an Austrian. And so calculus talks so much. And I am always talking in this, this Professor Calculus. And it just, by the end of the day, I'm like, no more.
Bedtime stories come at bedtime when the parent just wants the child gone. Really what you should be wanting is to build a strong bonding relationship and fond memories that will last a lifetime. But also you're like,
I can turn on Netflix as soon as this chapter's over.
Yeah, so you put on, you leave your phone in the child's bed with someone else reading it a bedtime story. I think that's probably pretty common.
I loved it. I was always big time bedtime story dad long after, when the kids even kind of had to be cajoled into it.
And what were the stories that you read?
Oh man, it was a little of everything.
Gulliver's Travels?
not that much a little of everything. As the old saying goes, it was a little of everything except Gulliver's Travels.
There was a time when I read her the Just So stories, and I just had to avoid all the racism. I would just sort of skirt around it, because I read the Just So stories when I was little, and they had I remembered them very fondly. You just have to kind of take the Kipling out of them.
We would do, you can't kipple. We would do, we would do big chunks. We did all the Tolkien and all the Narnias and I think Mindy might have read Harry Potter to my youngest. They're still, she recently revived it, and she has been reading
the Wall Street Journal?
The Princess Bride.
Oh, wow, that's meta.
With my youngest. Yeah, it really is. It's a bedtime story about, the book, I don't know if you've read the book. The book does not have the framing story with the grandpa.
Oh, but there's no Peter Falk in it?
But it does have a similar framing story in which William Goldman pretends that his dad found this old book and proceeded to only read him the interesting parts of it.
Oh, I see.
So it is kind of a meta thing. And maybe my wife is only reading the interesting parts of the interesting parts. I don't know. They have a plan to read I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith next, which I could not recommend more highly. I love that book.
Oh, I'll write it down.
It's mostly for middle-aged British women. But why
That's
not?
me.
Do you feel like you've got a Gertrude inside you somewhere?
My daughter's mother would absolutely describe herself as a early middle-aged British
as
woman.
a
young, exciting, vibrant, fashionable British woman.
I wonder if she has read it, because it's kind of had it was out of print for many years, but it's kind of been revived. So bedtime stories are actually still a going concern in my house, and here too, apparently.
Yeah, we still do them. And
did you ever read Goodnight Moon when your daughter was little?
Absolutely. It was in the collection of Goodnight books. Goodnight Gorilla, Goodnight Coffee Maker,
Goodbye Columbus.
Definitely read her Goodbye Columbus.
Farewell to Arms.
But yeah, we had
So Long and Thanks for All the Fish.
Pretty much any book that had a rabbit in it was going to make the cut.
That's how you decide between good literature and not?
Yeah,
Does it have a rabbit?
Peter Rabbit. And then I read her Watership Down, and that was the wrong move when she was 5 years old.
You can't go straight from Peter Rabbit to Watership Down.
Stop, go back.
There's got to be a PG and a PG-13 in between.
Flowers for Algernon.
You and I just had the same experience today, which is we both looked for our copy of Goodnight Moon and found that it had been culled at some point.
I went upstairs and asked her, where's Goodnight Moon? And she was like, that's for babies. So she sent it to Goodwill, not me.
But it also, kids have heard it 100 times, probably. Right. Like you're like, why do I even own this? It's in my psyche.
And when we couldn't find it, I think I said, don't worry, I know it.
It's a fairly recent addition to the canon. It was written in 1947 and only sold 6,000 copies. It probably sold less in the year it came out than any subsequent year, in fact.
I do not remember it from my childhood. Do you?
I do. And I'm on we're part of the second generation raised, having been written in 1947, boomers, our parents could have, well, not yours, but parents of people our age could have grown up being lulled to sleep by Goodnight Moon, and we were.
My dad was in law school in 1947.
And now our kids are. Well, he could have been lulled to sleep by that or by his contracts textbook, I guess. But it was not a hit at first. It was the kind of thing that it kind of snowballed. Like for many years, the New York Public Library, the head librarian there, or at least the head children's librarian, Ann Carroll Moore, famously hated it. And refused to shelve it. So, the New York Public Library would not have a copy of this, of now what you would think of as the greatest children's book of its age.
So this is the Moby Dick of children's literature.
Because it only became unappreciated at the time.
60 years after its founding.
Except that it's not the Moby Dick because it's only 132 words long. It's hard to think of a more
less Moby Dick,
minimalistic, repetitive children's book. And maybe that's why maybe that's some of, it's often spoken of as if it's got this almost mystical appeal and connection to children that just transcends anything about the words or the pictures. Like there's something incantatory about it, the way it can kind of produce sleep and change mood.
I'm surprised that it has 132 words. I wouldn't have guessed it had that many.
Oh, that counts repetitions. Those are not 132 distinct words.
Oh, I see.
That's the total length of the book if you put it in a word processor.
I see. And moon is 40 of those words.
Goodnight, I think, is used as one word, and it's half of them.
Right.
But yeah, it's often discussed how, just the way it appears to connect with kids on this weird psychological level that an adult can't even understand. And as a result, it's, far from, even though it's far from its success in 1947, today it sold 48 million copies. It's been translated into dozens of languages and spawned, I think, dozens of ironic parodies, Goodnight iPad and so forth.
Yeah, I've had a few of those. I've gotten a few of those as gifts. When you're a young dad, people are like, "Oh, here's your young dad handbook." You're like, "Yeah."
And Goodnight Moon really appeals to the child, whereas
Go the F to sleep.
Yeah, the bajillion selling "Go the F to sleep" whenever that was 10 years ago. That's clearly a parent's joke on other parents. Ha ha ha! That has nothing to do with the experience of childhood or bedtime at all.
I have a personal relationship with Adam Mansbach, the writer.
Oh, how do you know?
The author of Go the F to Sleep.
How do you know Adam?
I was hosting a series of author interviews at Bumbershoot, and he was one of the authors who came through. He had written a book at the time called Rage is Back. And Rage
children's book?
No, it was he was an author and was writing adult books. And so we were up on stage together, and I don't think I met him before he came out on the stage. And he sat down, and he went to Columbia. He's a whole, like a one of these people that if you read his bio, he seems like a certain kind of author you're about to encounter on stage. And he came out, sat down in the chair, and the way he speaks is like, yo, so then, like I was saying, like I took this dude and I was like, what? Say what? And so he talked for a while in answer to my first couple of questions, and I was so befuddled.
Are you doing a bit?
Well, so I said to him, what are you doing?
On stage?
In front of a big audience, and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, why are you talking that way?
He's keeping it real, John.
And then we had this whole conversation about like, yo, that's where I'm from, dog. I'm from the, and I was like, are you though? I mean, didn't you go to Columbia? Didn't you go to Rutgers? And he's like, yo.
But he is from the mean streets of Elizabeth, New Jersey or something?
I don't know. My sense is, I don't know. I'm surprised that Columbia University didn't beat it out of him. But for whatever reason, and I thought that he would be very offended by this experience of me, like kind of interrogating his. He's a Jewish guy, from Columbia.
I'm cringing a little already, and I wasn't there, but he didn't mind.
So the next time he was coming through Seattle, he was giving a talk at Town Hall about his subsequent book, and he was like, yo, I want that Roderick dude back. And so he asked for me, and I was his interlocutor at that event too.
Let the record show you're doing kind of the hand things you probably did when you were in the White Fresh crew.
Yeah, I'm doing the Beastie Boys yo. But then he realized, I think, that his serious adult books did not do, because he wrote Go the F to Sleep in an afternoon, just sort of it would be funny.
It's why when celebrities write books, they're always children's storybooks.
Yeah.
Because you can do it in 6 hours.
But he's subsequently written, seriously, just go to sleep, was his follow-up. And then you have to effing eat. And then seriously, you have to eat. And then F, which is what I'm saying now instead of the word.
What a good dad.
F, now there are two of you, which presumably is about having a second child.
You got to have a gift for the second baby shower
Right.
if you gave them Go to F to Sleep the first time.
And then his most recent humor book is A Field Guide to the Jewish People, which he co-wrote with Alan Zwiebel and Dave Barry. The least Jewish person I've ever thought of Dave
He's
Barry.
from Miami, though.
Yeah, I guess.
He's observed them in their habitat.
But anyway, I thought he was an extremely charming guy.
I don't even mind when that happens to writers. Like, you know what? Your publisher wants to sell another 6 million books.
Yeah, so,
Go with God.
Yeah, now you really have to effing eat. But
continue to go the F to sleep.
I'm super happy for him. He's like a super nice guy. I wonder if he still is like yo-yo.
Is it like eat your effing dinner, go the F to sleep story?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Rogue One.
I mean, it's the type of thing you could write these books on the bus, right? But I don't know when we talk about Goodnight Moon, how much child psychology is behind the book. Did the author live to see her success?
Yes.
Okay.
Except, well, not really, actually. The author was successful in her lifetime and lived a fascinating life. We'll get into Margaret Wise Brown. But she also, she also died. The book didn't even get into the New York Public Library until, I think, 1972. A librarian had to retire for that book to get in there.
The gatekeeper.
Whereas Margaret Wise Brown was a respected children's author, but she died in 1952 and had no idea that this thing was going to be selling still, hundreds of thousands of copies a year in the science fiction year of 2020.
So she was already a children's book author and a success prior to Goodnight Moon was toward the end of her career.
Goodnight Moon was not her first book. She had written many other children's books. You may have some of them. Do you remember The Runaway Bunny?
Of course.
Which is just kind of a similar bedtime litany between a mother bunny and a daughter bunny.
So the Runaway Bunny was a huge hit in our family because the little bunny runs away and the mother bunny has this like spooky. Little bunny's like, I'm gonna become a bird, and she's like, then I will become a cloud.
And I will be the wind.
Yeah, and I will lift your wings or whatever. And it's just like, okay, mother bunny's not letting go.
It really gets the fierce mother-child connection.
But it was that we read that book even more than Goodnight Moon.
I don't think the Goodnight book really existed when Goodnight Moon was written. Today that's a genre of the children's bookshelf. And Margaret Wise Brown, I think, essentially created it. But when you look at Goodnight Moon again, it is deeply weird. For readers who have somehow missed out, it's a series of pictures of a large and fairly ornate children's bedroom with a young bunny in bed at that stage, or, audience right, stage left, saying goodnight to the objects in the room one at a time. So it's a very simple idea. A kid in bed saying goodnight shelf, goodnight lamp.
Mm-hmm.
Writes itself, except the book is much interesting and weirder than that. For one thing, in the Clement Hurd illustrations, the room is not what you'd expect a children's bedroom to look like at all. It's in vivid gem tones, bright green walls, bright red flooring.
It's an exciting, dynamic place.
It is. There's a roaring fire. It looks a little old-fashioned. The pictures all have very ornate frames. There's a crazy old-fashioned clock and set of ornamental vases or something in light blue on the mantelpiece. So it's a very elaborately decorated kids' room, but it then also has touches like a tiger skin rug next to the bed.
I always felt like the child was going to sleep in the living room.
Yeah, you almost feel like you're seeing the whole house because it's so big. But in fact, it's all bedroom stuff. It's a bookshelf and a dollhouse and so forth. Outside the windows is nothing, a starry void.
Mm-hmm.
With
just like outside my windows.
With a moon usually so low in the window pane that the house might as well be an island in space.
Are there sandworms?
Right. Like they might be in it's not Dune, but maybe it's the Beetlejuice void outside the house.
Don't go out the door.
The room has a lot of kind of weird Dutch angles to it. Like, it does seem like it's influenced by some of the modernists at the time, in the palette and the way that the walls meet at weird angles. It might be a Cézanne room or something.
The zebra skin rug, very popular mid-century modern element.
It's clearly modernist. And then it has kind of postmodern touch. There's a lot of things you wouldn't expect in a room. Like there's a kind of a maternal figure sitting knitting in the rocking chair, a comforting figure, presumably while the child nods off.
Mm-hmm.
But the book never calls her a mother at all. The book just says it's an old lady saying hush, as if perhaps the child doesn't know why there's an old lady in the rocking chair, which is a little David Lynchian almost.
Sorry about that.
There are 3 paintings on the wall, but each is weirder than the last. There's one is of a cow jumping over the moon. The child says goodbye. That's kind of another weird touch. The book kind of rhymes, but also moon rhymes with moon several times.
Sure.
Goodbye to the cow jumping over the moon.
Is there a bowler hat on an apple? No.
No, but there are surrealist touches like that. Like one postmodern touch is the runaway bunny. Her previous big hit is on the bookshelf.
Oh.
In the room. This bunny owns her previous book, The Runaway Bunny.
Well done.
The other painting is of the 3 little bears sitting on 3 chairs. A lot of the items in the room seem to be chosen to facilitate rhyming. Like there, for unaccountable reason, there's a drying rack with 2 socks and 2 mittens on it. That thing we all have in our bedroom.
Sure.
A drying rack with 2 socks and 2 mittens.
And there are 2 kittens.
Yes, the mittens are there to rhyme with the kittens playing on the floor. The socks presumably rhyme with the clocks. There's a alarm clock on her nightstand and the weird blue clock on the mantelpiece.
If I remember correctly, the perspective is crazy.
Yes.
To the drawings, right? It's just like there is no 3-point perspective. It's just like
it's all kind of flattened out a little bit in the way, like there's kind of a cubist thing going on with the room.
The bed is against the wall, but then because the wall is exploded outward, the bed is...
It almost looks like a sitcom room, like where everything's got to be kind of trapezoidally shaped so the actors can cheat toward the studio audience.
Right.
The weirdest picture is the one at the left side of the frame above the dollhouse. It's a black and white picture. It's a painting of a little bunny fishing. But if you look closely, you'll realize that the bunny is fishing with a carrot on its line. And the prey it's trying to attract is a little bunny fish swimming in the stream.
A bunny fish.
A bunny fisherman is trying to eat a smaller aquatic bunny.
A bunny fish swimming in stream.
So there's maybe cannibalism going on there.
Oh, okay. I don't remember this. I guess I didn't look as closely. Maybe I wasn't paying attention.
I am doing a very close reading of but even to the casual observer, there's a red balloon floating above the bed. At first you'd think, of course, that's the kind of cute thing a nursery would have.
Are there 99
there is only ein Luftballon. But it's a perfect shiny red globe hovering right over the bed in a way that seems a little unearthly. Like not necessarily menacing, but there is something to the adult eye that is very odd about the room.
Is it on the ceiling, or is the ceiling not visible and it's just sort of...
I think it's stuck to the top of the frame, which we assume is some kind of proscenium arch through which we see the scene.
All right.
Yeah, you don't see the ceiling. It does kind of look like scenery. And there's a bowl of mush that we say goodnight to, but why is a bowl of uneaten mush sitting on the nightstand at bedtime?
Well, I can answer that question because, like my daughter, this bunny takes food into her room, and then her bed is full of old banana peels.
If this was my kid's room, it would be full of Spindrift cans and sugar ants. Some of this stuff is some of this weirdness is actually in the text. As the story goes on, if you'll remember, it gets a little more abstract. We stop saying goodnight to socks and clocks, and we start saying goodnight to the air.
Right.
We start saying goodnight to noises.
Goodnight noise.
We say goodnight to nobody. There's a blank page where we say goodnight to nobody. So there's a lot of
Hermann Goering.
They say goodnight to prominent Third Reich figures, which is odd. No, that was
not true.
There were some things removed from the book. For example, the cow jumping over the moon had an udder in the original illustration, which later got Baudelarized.
Is that because of the New York Public Librarian that she was like, you have to paint over that udder?
I think that was the publisher.
She was like, yo, you got to paint over the udder.
Adam, what's his
dog?
Name? No, she was like, even though this cow correctly has no udder, I still refuse to shelf this book.
Mm-hmm.
But for all these oddnesses, children don't experience it that way. It really has this hypnotic quality that really shows that it intuitively understands, as we talked about when we discussed Mr. Rogers, most children's entertainment is not written for children. It's full of cheeky nods to the adults who are going to purchase it. Whereas this book connects to the preschool brain on a very deep level. The room gets dim, but never dark.
There's a little lamp that's always on.
Yeah, the room is still comforting, the fire, the two lamps, the bright colors, even at a time of day that is scary for kids. And I've read some kind of modern psychological theorizing on why, almost 75 years later, next year it'll turn 75.
It does feel like a quiet, safe, even the two little kittens don't feel disruptive. They're just like, it's that thing. What were the sounds in your house as a kid that after you went to bed, you could still hear the parents doing stuff, moving around?
Love to hear the Apple II Plus keyboard clicking because my dad was still up.
Apple II Plus. I like to hear the washing machine.
Yeah.
The nightly news out there kind of.
I had bedtime issues as a kid, and I really liked the idea that comforting life was continuing in the house, that it wasn't about to become a dark void, an absence, where I could wake up and scary things would happen.
The Watergate hearings were a big part of what comforted me.
I thought you were going to say the water heater, but also the Watergate hearings.
Watergate hearings, just hearing, Ellsberg.
If I hear
testifying.
Sam Rayburn today, there is something very cozy about the room.
And the perspective,
but
the weird perspective.
Do you think that's because we've just been seeing it for 75 years? Today, this conveys coziness to us, but in 1947, it clearly would have been an odd modernist space.
No, I think when a kid doesn't understand perspective, and so looking into a room, you would be able to see
every surface.
Yeah, the tops of all the tables, even though, why are you looking down from some corner? I mean, I think it makes sense. And the colors are, although they're bright, they're also dark. It's a dark room, or it's a night room.
The colors are all rich and deep, and there's a lot of repetition of them. The room does not have every color. It has a lot of that gem green, this kind of warm, reddish brown, this chestnut hue.
Christmas colors.
And some yellow highlights.
Yeah.
So it's
it feels inviting.
And the windows of the lights are on in the dollhouse. The whole thing seems to be very aware of my childhood fear, which is that life in the house was going to stop and I was going to wake up to a cold, empty, silent house with no one to comfort me if I had a nightmare.
Tell me more, Ken.
Should we work through this?
Yeah, I feel like at least I've got you talking.
I think this happens a lot because we don't remember that part of our childhood well. We kind of we remember stuff later in childhood. We remember the ironic takes on that stuff. We remember Calvin and Hobbes and the monster under the bed.
Right.
And we forget that there was a time when we were a few years younger when we were really scared at bedtime.
The monster was real.
It was just bedtime. So I've read some kind of modern psychologists trying to break down why Goodnight Moon works. And their theory generally is that bedtime is scary for kids in a way that adults don't understand and can't communicate with.
Because there's no evidence that you will wake up.
Right. You're giving up complete control.
Yeah.
And the bunny in this book does not give up control. The bunny exerts order over bedtime by cataloging the comforting objects surrounding her, saying goodnight to each of them in turn. There's a sense that this is a pattern for the bunny. And if you read the book to your kids every night, it's a pattern in your house as well. The room gets dim but doesn't dark. There's still all this color and signs of life. It's a way for the child to feel reassured at bedtime instead of alone and at sea. Because
also the kittens and the fire and the curtains are also going to sleep. The presumption is in saying goodnight to them that they're both kind of vigilant and also...
Yeah, they're still there. They don't disappear when they're said goodnight to. But I guess they're with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this book was never read. We owned it, but this book was never read to me that much as a kid, I think. But it's still like the illustrations are like so deep in my DNA that I feel like this is now a comforting room in our culture. And in fact, it's often recreated full size for children's museums. Just in April, an art collective on the Lower East Side built the Goodnight Moon Room
Mm-hmm.
At full size, complete with, replicas of, fun kind of artistic takeoffs of the fire and the kittens and so forth.
And then David Byrne was in there DJing and having a dance party.
There should be a club that looks like the Goodnight.
Yeah. Or rooms from all the great children's books.
This club has everything. Bears on chairs, kittens with mittens.
Did you read it to yourself? Is that it wasn't read to you, but maybe you had it and looked at it as a kid?
Maybe. You always look at the books in your room so many times.
Yeah.
Right? Because you only have a certain number. The library is a wealth, but your room maybe has 25 books and you know every picture by heart. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, what he's going to do next.
Right.
And
Nobody ever read Richard Scarry to me, but I know every single
especially
note.
those, because
Yeah.
you can just stare at the page for hours. And you can, to this day, you were saying you didn't know what kind of car to get recently. Did you not think of getting a car that's shaped like a toothbrush or an apple?
Right. Get a little lowly worm car.
A banana mobile? What were you thinking? There's also something very prosaic about the book. It takes place in a normal place, a child's bedroom with some weird modernist touches, but it takes place in a familiar, comforting place. And that was kind of the innovation of the author, Margaret Wise Brown.
Because most children's books up to that point took place on World War I battlefields.
Well, if you think about what children read in the 30s and 40s, there was a lot of distant lands and knights in shining armor and times of yore. Back then, children got one book and it was Ivanhoe. They just had to read Ivanhoe over and over. And they're like, you'll like this. I think it has a jousts at one point.
Right. Swiss Family Robinson. You've got the pirates, often scary pirates.
It's long ago times and exotic places, some of them fantastic, fairy kingdoms, fairy tales and stuff.
You've got rhinoceroses before they have plates. You've got leopards before they have spots.
And this was a very specific academic theory that Margaret Wise Brown called, well, she didn't come up with it, but she ascribed to the here and now theory of children, which is that they didn't need and in fact could not appreciate all that stuff. Like she realized, wait, that's adult trappings. That's what gets adults to buy a book, is if it has Robin Hood and fair ladies in it.
It's the Baba Ram Dass theory of early childhood development,
which is
be here now.
That's right. It's just that the child should be surrounded by the things that remind it of his or her own life.
Yeah.
The money quote here, I think this is Margaret Wise Brown, although it could be her mentor. It is only the blind eye of the adult that finds the familiar uninteresting.
The blind eye of the adult.
Like we've seen children's bedrooms so many times that we think, this is boring. What's the second act? Whereas a kid is like, no, this is perfect. And I actually believe that. Like it really kind of falls in line with my theory of, the moment in the Miyazaki movie where the kid just stops and looks at tadpoles for 8 seconds or whatever. Like that's the moment that speaks to the child, the kind of the familiar thing.
Well, yeah, we watched Kiki's Delivery Service, but when my daughter was a little bit older, and we were struck by how little happens. What's going on in this movie?
Who is the villain of Kiki's Delivery Service? Wait.
She's just delivering things, and
sometimes it goes well. Yeah. Sometimes there's some challenges.
Yeah, but she gets it done.
Sometimes the obstacle in her way is herself, and she needs the woods lady to help her understand that.
Yeah.
So that's an intentional part of this book and her other books like Runaway Bunny, that they take place in familiar settings that the child will still be fascinated by, because to a kid, everything is new. Right.
In Runaway Bunny, the kid is not trying to run away to Tanganyika. The kid is just running away to things that it can think of.
And then it all seems to be happening in a childhood home, When your kids were little, did you have very clear daily patterns in your house? Yeah. I think kids thrive on that kind of, and that's my childhood. The bologna sandwich at noon, Sesame Street at 4.
The pediatrician always said to us from the time that the baby was born, kids really want patterns. They want stability. They want it to be the same thing every day. And I was like, I'm a rock musician. I'm here sometimes and I'm not others. None of us wake up at the same time or go to sleep at the same time. We eat at random times. Is this going to affect our child? There is no pattern. He was like, absolutely. The pediatrician was like, well, that's not ideal. I was like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, I've never had a meal at the same time from day to day ever. And I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, I'm leaving tomorrow, and her mother also travels for work. And so we've always been conscious of the fact that our kid has not had the regularity that apparently, according to everybody, a child really needs.
But some of that has accreted in your household.
Over time.
Yeah.
But like when she was little,
I feel like now she has a very stable, routine, welcoming kind of,
yeah.
It's not an adventurous, You're not the weird dad in the indie movie raising the kid on a RV at the beach or whatever.
No, but when she was 3 and 4, it was like, tonight you're staying at Nana's. Daddy's gonna, Daddy's gonna FaceTime you from Antwerp tomorrow. So I feel bad. Anyway, she's gonna have stuff to say to her college roommate about what a bad childhood she had.
No, I don't think so. I just realized that same kind of epiphany that the children want to read. Children want art about the stuff that's familiar to them and not about the dragons and the dwarves is also the epiphany of Pacific Northwest legend Beverly Cleary.
Right.
I think that's the story she tells. She always had these books about, race car drivers in desert islands. And she was like, kids don't even grok any of that. Like, where's the book about how to save up for a new bike or getting a dog or when your friend's annoying sister won't leave you alone, and that was kind of the origin of all the Beezus and Henry and Ramona books is like, today we think of that as the archetypal kids book, Dick and Jane type adventures on a suburban street, a medium-sized city street, I guess Northeast Portland as it happens. But like that was actually revolutionary. Like Beverly Cleary kind of had to invent that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you're right. Of course, you think of,
You think all children's books take place on those leafy streets?
Yeah, it's just like somebody's dumb little brother is always getting, up into the treehouse. And
she had to invent that because kids were just reading Ivanhoe.
Right.
And when you got done with Ivanhoe, maybe you got Silas Marner.
Beowulf.
Margaret Wise Brown was a little older. Let's see, Beverly Cleary just died at 103. So she was born in the
1916.
1916.
Can you imagine all the places she'd seen? All the things she'd done?
Probably no places because you couldn't go anywhere at that age. I mean,
she lived in Portland her whole life.
Margaret Wise Brown, I guess mostly the same generation then, born in 1910, although on the other coast, kind of a fairly wealthy Long Island family, the kind that could send her to some nice girls' school in Virginia. And upon graduation, she loved the modernists. She loved Proust and Virginia Woolf and Gertrude Stein. And when she graduated, she returned to New York and found this kind of progressive school with modern views of childhood and particularly like, here's what immigrant kids need. This is, this would be the kind of the 30s New York. So burgeoning immigrant population and lots of kind of progressive do-gooders trading ideas on what are the right educational theories. And her mentor, this woman named Lucy Sprague Mitchell, really believed in this here and now stuff, like in every respect, like
tear down the Lower East Side and build the Stuyvesant town.
Yeah, and the school should be full of things that are familiar to the kids.
Oh, I see. So not tear down the Lower East Side.
No, actually, like, the kids should like learn in their milieu. The story should be about people like them, instead of theory about the water cycle, let them actually hold an eroded limestone rock or, show them things. And so there's a lot of kind of hands-on education and
proto-Montessori.
Yeah, exactly. It seems kind of Montessori-esque. And Margaret Wise Brown taught there and got off to a really rocky start. Her classroom management was terrible. She was always getting her, like a pretty definitive biography of her came out not too long ago. And it's got all her teacher evaluations. And I guess the kids were always running wild and the glue pots were spilling everywhere.
She was drunk all the time.
She was not drunk all the time. But she didn't like children particularly, like many great children's artists. Famously, Maurice Sendak and Roald Dahl, all these people who didn't...
Edward Gorey.
Yeah, they didn't care for kids much. And
Edward Gorey at least was honest and killed them all.
But she did seem to understand kids.
I should say that Montessori predates this.
Maria Montessori does, yeah. I don't know how well known the schools would have been in America, though, at the time.
Oh, right, Italian.
I have no idea when the first U.S. Montessori school probably came with Italian immigration. I don't know.
Like pizza.
Probably at the same time.
Yeah.
If you could only choose one, what would you keep? Let's say the Italians can only give us one gift.
Got a pizza pie over here and a school, a Montessori.
Hands-on a school. So she didn't do great at Bank Street as a teacher, but the school also had a writer's lab. And she started selling children's stories with this kind of here and now vibe. And when her first story sold, it was a huge party. She stopped a donkey cart in the street and bought every flower or she cast a check, stopped a cart in the street, bought every flower, and went all over the city giving her friends flowers. And when you read about her kind of life, really is a true New York bohemian of the 30s.
That's kind of the MC Hammer story, right? He
did it a few too many times, I think.
Gave away bought too many flowers.
If you limit it to one donkey cart or horse cart where the horse is wearing a hat with holes for ears, I think it's okay.
So she didn't like kids, but she was good at writing children's books. It's kind of if you can't teach, do.
Maybe. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of I don't know. Do you think like any of these guys, I mean, Fred Rogers seemed to really love children.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people who really understand kids, it's from their own memories of their own childhood, which may include some dark memories, right?
It's so commonplace to not like kids. I've always liked kids, so I never understood it. But watching people interact with kids, you go, oh, you don't like kids at all, or you don't want anything to do with them. It's not that you don't like them; it's that they're terrifying. They're gross.
Yeah, and it's you're bringing back memories from your own childhood where all your experiences with kids have been alienated.
Oh, right.
And I don't have that, so I try not to think less of. It's really easy to think less of people today who dislike kids, because I really do think that's not anything to brag about and something that should be worked to overcome. But I have sympathy for it because it really is, you see other kids and you think about the kids that pushed you off the slide.
Right. Those are the girls I like to date.
The girls that pushed you off the slide?
Well, yes, but also the ones now that are like, I don't want kids.
I just want a girl to push me off my sex swing. No.
I want to stay on that sex swing.
So reading about her life in the 30s is really delightful because it really seems like just a WPA era wonderland. She meets Clement Hurd, who illustrated many of her books, including Goodnight Room, had just come back from Paris, where he was studying from Fernand Léger and Margaret Wise Brown, who they called Goldie and Brownie or Tim, because she had the hair that looked like Timothy Hay. These are her cute.
Great. These are Calvin and Hobbes references.
Her cute non-binary nicknames. She and all her friends have decided they're going to rent a train car and go to Hartford to see the new Gertrude Stein Virgil Thompson opera performed by an all-black cast.
Well, you don't see this in Goodnight Moon, but you're saying that the illustration is a little Dada because it's actually coming from that culture.
This guy had studied with a great French modernist patron, and in fact, when Brown finished the manuscript, she sent Hurd like a copy of a Goya painting. It's usually called Boy in Red. Manuel Osorio Manrique de Zuniga of a little kid in a bright red outfit. It's the same color as the flooring in Goodnight Room, but with a bunch of animals sitting around. And this is kind of the fine art vibe she wanted. But yeah, they all loved modern literature, modern art.
I wish that she'd sent him La Maja. That would have been a much better book.
That's a different kind of Goodnight story. There's no market for Tijuana Bibles of classic children's books because you would get arrested.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of bohemian circles she's running in, out with friends, laughing all night like right. Dorothy Parker, Edna St. Vincent Millay.
Algonquin Hotel, I was going to say.
Yeah. And in fact, when she leaves Bank Street and joins up with a new publishing house as kind of a in-house children's book writer and editor, she actually gets Gertrude Stein to write a children's book for her. Gertrude Stein and her illustrator, Clement Hurd, collaborate on Gertrude Stein's only children's book, The World is Round, which I guess is not very good. But she was a real tough cookie in that job. An editor once gave her a pair of dueling pistols as a joke because of what a hard bargain she would drive as a writer.
That's a good joke, but also an incredible gift.
Yeah, for every occasion.
Can you
right?
imagine, like, oh, hey, I got you something. You open a box, it's a pair of dueling
pistols. It's a pair of dueling pistols.
Wow.
But it does kind of convey, I don't think you want to give that for like an anniversary gift.
Yeah, right, I guess not.
But she continued to write her books at this time. Runaway Bunny came to her on the ski slopes, and she wrote the whole thing on the back of a ski receipt. Like all the well, then I will turn into the sun and I will make the rain dry up, all that stuff on the back of a ski receipt.
That's awesome.
Her life, it's really kind of a glamorous life. She had a series of relationships with dashing young men, and then in 1940 she met socialite Blanche Elricks of a wealthy Manhattan family.
It's so nice to be the member of a wealthy Manhattan family at this time.
There's so many of them in this story. Elricks, to protect her family's reputation, went by Michael Strange when she wrote her erotic feminist poetry. But she masqueraded as a male writer of erotic feminist poetry? Yes.
Okay.
But she also had married John Barrymore.
Okay.
In the 20s.
All right.
The greatest actor of his time.
Pretty great.
Married into the Barrymore family. She's not Drew Barrymore's great-grandma. That would be his third wife, Dolores.
Great step-grandmother. Step-great-grandmother.
That's right. Step-great-grandmother. But Margaret Wise Brown and Michael Strange fell for each other in a big way and had this tumultuous 10-year relationship where they bought neighboring apartments on the Upper East Side.
The best way to go.
And lived as romantic partners for most of the 40s.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But with, many dish-breaking, door-slamming fight and breakup, in which case Margaret Wise Brown would retreat to her beloved country house in Maine, which she called the Only House. And one time after a fight, she went up to the Only House.
She sounds like John Hodgman.
She does. She's, except he was doing it, for the E.B. White reason. And
right.
Margaret Wise Brown probably knew E.B. White. And so she settled into this empty house in the Maine countryside. And she remembered this thing she used to do as a kid, which was to kind of lull herself to sleep by naming all the objects in the room. So she started to do that in her Maine country house. And, just saying goodnight to the knob on the drawer. And it started to become an idea in her head later in the decade when she was back together with Blanche Elricks, aka Michael Strange. She had a dream one night where she remembered that saying goodnight litany, but it was set in a kind of a red and green room in her downstairs neighbor's apartment. And so suddenly it coalesced into the book, which not unlike Go the F to Sleep, I'm sure she wrote in an afternoon.
And she was already versed in anthropomorphized rabbits.
She'd already written The Runaway Bunny. I think in an early version of the book, the characters are human. And it was Clement Hurd who decided he did not want to draw a human mom knitting and a human baby sleeping and painted them as rabbits in a callback to the previous book. And Margaret Wise Brown loved it. Unfortunately, just 2 months after the book came out, Michael Strange collapsed from what they thought was fatigue, and it turned out to be leukemia. And she died shortly thereafter, ending this great and tumultuous relationship for Margaret Wise Brown. But she rebounded. Just a few years later, she was suddenly engaged to James Stillman Rockefeller Jr.
Oh, wow.
Speaking of being a member of a wealthy Manhattan family.
This story just rolls and rolls.
He is a Rockefeller. His dad had run what became Citibank. I think at the time it was the National City Bank of New York. His dad had run that for decades. So Pebble Rockefeller was doing very well for himself. He had actually been on the cover of Time magazine, I think. Oh, this is probably the dad. I think the dad was an Olympic athlete who had actually been on the rowing crew with Benjamin Spock that won an Olympic gold medal in the 1920s and was married to a woman who had previously been married to Thor Heyerdahl of Omnibus fame. So this is her new beau, is Pebble Rockefeller. And this is now the new love of her life, and everything's going great. And she heads to Nice, France for work and has to get surgery there on an ovarian cyst. And is recovering in the hospital and is recovering well and wants to show off to a nurse how well she is doing. So she kicks her legs in the air to kick her blankets off. And in doing so, dislodges a blood clot in her leg and is dead of a pulmonary embolism within the hour.
Oh, no.
So Margaret Wise Brown passed away in, I think 1952.
At what age?
She would have been, born in 1910. She would have been in her mid-40s.
Wow.
So not a long life. And as you say, you asked if she had lived to see the book become a success. She was a successful kids writer, but Goodnight Moon was not selling 1 million copies a year like it would in the 70s and 80s and 90s. So in a kind of a funny postscript, she left the rights of that particular book in her will to the son of a friend of hers, a woman named McCormick, who, was kind of seemed like she needed a leg up. Maybe a single mom needed a leg up. She left it all to this kid. Unfortunately, the kid, by the time she died, the kid was already a teen and already kind of a delinquent. And he inherits the rights to this book at a time when he's already enmeshed in drugs and crime and
1950s drugs and crime. He's
he's a rebel without a cause.
Yeah, wow, a Brando.
So from the 50s into the 60s and the 70s, a trust is releasing to him. The book is starting to make more and more money. He's getting increasing allowance of hundreds of dollars a week, which immediately goes into, his arm or his awful friends or whatever. And so he lives a dissolute lifestyle. The Wall Street Journal profiled him in the 2000s at some point.
Whoa.
Where Albert Edward Clark was still alive, pushing 60, and still living his
smoking opium,
dissolute life, traveling around the country, abandoning kids and families and women right and left.
But now a multimillionaire.
You'd think. But he just manages to, he gets the check twice a year and it's gone weeks later.
He never signed it away. He just does that much blow.
He never made a bad legal decision. He just, apparently just makes a series of bad decisions.
Wow.
And, the trustee, probably died in the 70s, giving him sudden access to hundreds of thousands of dollars, which again was gone by the end of the year. And he seems like he's not all there. It's kind of I kind of feel bad that they even are profiling this guy who can't even remember the name of the book and just jokes about that it's, just alcohol syndrome or early Alzheimer's or something.
Oh boy.
And now believes that Margaret Wise Brown was actually his mother.
Oh.
And that nobody's talking about this. And
when do the rights become public domain?
Well, the Sonny Bono Copyright Act extended it 20 years. So he can count on proceeds from Goodnight Moon coming well into the 2040s.
Oh boy.
At which time he would be in his late 90s. And probably, I don't even know if I think he's still alive. I didn't find a death notice for him. So every time you give a copy of Goodnight Moon away at a baby shower or something, 100% of the proceeds are going to this kind of lost child of the mid 20th century. The outgrowth of Margaret Wise Brown's bohemian scene.
Who do you think is going to inherit the rights when he doesn't? You're saying he's got multiple kids?
He does. He's been prosecuted for kidnapping them, carrying them out of the room under his arm like a football.
So this is potentially going to finally right the wrong of all of his bad parenting.
You think?
All of these, well,
so
what rights the wrong more than money?
If a kid has been raised wrong, all you need to do is throw a large check at them on a regular basis.
Based on the most good-natured children's book of all time.
Maybe they'll be curious and they'll look at the book and they will be soothed by its gem tones and reassuring repetitive imagery.
Yeah, the book written by their apparent grandmother.
Who knows?
And that concludes Goodnight Moon, entry 539.PR0324, certificate number 44141 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, and the even more unlikely event that I or one of you inherit the remaining copyright to the enormous proceeds of Goodnight Moon,
How come my mom didn't befriend some struggling writer who bequeathed her the rights to a book that later became a bestseller?
Well, your mom was happily married. It was my mom that would be more likely. My poor divorced mother who was working 80 hours a week.
That's right.
Where's my...
She needed a benefactress.
Well, yeah, we didn't live on the Lower East Side or Upper East Side or wherever they lived. Upstate Maine.
There could have been some Seattle or Alaska millionaire artist who...
The guy that wrote The Weedle on the Needle?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Weedle on the Needle guy, Jim Weedle.
Anyway, you can find Ken on the internet at Ken Jennings. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/John Roderick. You can write us emails at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can find other Futurelings on Facebook and Instagram and Reddit and the other places, Snapchat, wherever Futurelings are mentioned. You can mail us at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. Got any mail over there?
Yeah, this one's pretty good. Our friend David Chelsea, the Portland cartoonist, even the envelope,
It's Milli Vanilli.
It's a beautiful watercolor of
so
Milli
beautiful.
Vanilli. I don't even want to open this because I'm afraid.
Yeah, don't mess it up.
Do you have like a letter opener? Like,
there's so many
you
knives
probably have
around
a drawer
here.
of them.
Yeah, I don't have a knife right here, and that is an embarrassment to me. What if you attack me?
Yeah, I thought you were always ready for anything. What if civilization collapses right now?
Well, here, you can use the pin from this Hilbert Hotel button.
And the back is very
adhered.
I feel like he made his own envelope here, just in order to use a better
right
better
painting
tooth of
surface.
paper. Yeah. David said since we liked the reprinted envelopes I sent last time. Oh yeah, last time he included some past Christmas card envelopes or something. Here are some more. I used to bring them to comic conventions back in the pre-COVID days and sell them for $1 a piece. He would also swap them for other merch from other artists at the cons as a way of getting stuff without spending money. Although, given the price of printer ink, I'm not sure I actually came out ahead. Boy, isn't that the way? These are cool old envelopes he has sent us with copies of past artwork, watercolors of friends, family, and Jodie Foster.
Oh,
possibly.
Well done.
Some kind of 60s era ventriloquist, a kind of a shrunken Bill Plimpton looking distorted man, a scary Jack-in-the-Box clown, a bunch of doodled heads. These are just each a beautiful work of art that I think was an original when he first sent it, and he's kept copies for other uses. Look at those.
These are things that you listeners don't have to just hear us describe. You can actually see them if you subscribe to our Patreon, where there are many great photographs of our mail and other ephemera from the production of the show. And we will put these up there.
If you would like to own something similar, I bet you could go to dchelsea.com and see what's available.
And if you'd like to own Omnibus show notes and other chick tracks and other weird things that we have lying around,
signed by us,
just subscribe at the giant sentient nostril level or whatever it is. You can find it on patreon.com/omnibusproject.
You could also go to omnibusproject.com/store if you wanted to own omnibus-related shirts, hats, mugs, and similar. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. Good night, John. Good night, Ken.
Good night, John. Good night, Ken.
Good night, laptop. Good night, ballpoint pen. Good night, Diet Dr. Pepper in a can. Good night, A. Nazir ingot that was sent to us by a man. We hope and pray that the catastrophe fear may never come and we can all sleep soundly. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.